Welcome, friends. This is the January-February issue of Incandescent Health and Wellness magazine, where we look toward the future of architecture, passive design, and the greening of America with today's amazing guests, Alex Yuen and Edie Dillman. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, publisher of Incandescent and founder of Incandescent Radio and TV, and I couldn't be happier than to have these two amazing visionaries featured in this issue of the magazine. Before I turn the show over to Alex, who will be interviewing Edie, I want to remind our audience that he's the lead architect on a project that I've been cooking up since 2020 to create the Incandescent Retreat Center for Women here in Santa Fe, where I am based. My son Dylan, who was his student at the University of Virginia, introduced us. Now Alex, his partner Weijia Song, and Dylan are all at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design. I'm very proud to report that they're all amazing and working with us to make this vision come true. So I'm here in Santa Fe studying massage with the goal of running a spa at the center. And that's where I met Edie, whose amazing company B.Public is based. You're going to learn all about that on today's episode. So take it away, Alex.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here with you both, Hope and Edie. As Hope said, my name is Alex Yuen. I'm an architect, an urban designer, and also a lecturer at Harvard's Graduate School of Design, where I teach design as well. It's really my pleasure today to talk with Edie Dillman, who's the co-founder of B.Public Prefab in Santa Fe, about her work, her journey, and the impact that she's trying to make through disrupting a little bit of the construction industry. So Edie, thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Hope.
I think we should start off, Edie, maybe give us a little bit of a brief self-introduction. Tell us what brought you to Santa Fe in the first place and what you've been up to for the past few years with B.Public.
Yeah, it's I feel like I've just landed in Santa Fe, but I've been here for 23 years. It's one of those wonderful places that sort of calls you in. And I moved here from Chicago. So I was running a company in Chicago, helping creatives be business people. A lot of people who are creative get into business because they have talent and because they find themselves with clients, but very few of us, I would say, actually know the business side. So I was running my own firm there called Small Fires, and really just longed for the mountains. I'd gone to California for school. I was a Claremont kid and just missed the mountains. Chicago was wonderful, but really flat, and kind of threw a dart towards the west and ended up in Santa Fe. Actually, when we left Chicago in my old car, I don't think we had a destination. We had friends in Albuquerque and friends in Santa Fe, and just sort of turned right and ended up in Santa Fe and have never left. And for the last couple of years, I have had the pleasure of launching a new company with two amazing partners, both of whom I've known for, it feels like ever, 30 years for Charlotte Lagarde and 26 for Jonas Stanford. So we've known each other a very, very long time. And this company, the seed for this company came from Jonah's work, but it was one of those seeded ideas and sort of exploded when the three of us started talking about it. So it we spent a year in sort of the business planning stage and being really intentional about starting this company. And then we launched services and products in January of 2020, right before COVID hit.
It's a fairly young company, but I'm sure in the past couple of years, like all of us, it's grown. It's aged a little bit faster than normal. But can you maybe, Edie, just give us a brief description of what you're offering? You know, prefab construction, but what is it? We hear all about it all the time, but what does it mean exactly?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And I think I don't want to get stuck here, but I do think it's worth talking about. There's a lot of confusion in sort of the world about when you say prefab or when you say modular, you say, you know, all of these sort of buzz terms. And we're really specific around, we are a panelized construction. So rather than building, and we specifically are working on housing, building a home, 1 2x4 after another, stick frame or site built, It's really a Craftsman made panelized solution so that you're craning in whole walls or entire floors or roof panels in to bring the entire structure of the building up in a matter of days rather than framing over a month or 2 or 3. And that system is designed very specifically for a high performance or a low energy. So it's very well insulated. You could say twice the normal insulation for a standard US home. It's paired with high performance vapor barrier and weather barrier. And all of that is craned in that panel. So you're getting, say, 7 sequences that would be done on site in one install. So it's very specific when we talk about panelized or prefab or modular. A lot of people think modular is the only thing where you see whole homes kind of being craned into place. And this is really more Lego-like. So it's a tool for architects and designers like yourself to design with. It's dimensioned. We often talk about it as the same as buying windows and doors. You wouldn't necessarily build your windows and doors on site in the rain. And so why does it make more sense to do the walls? And so it's a different kind of solution for people to consider. And I think we'll talk about this more in the conversation, but there are very few opportunities for consumers and designers to make choices that are truly sustainable and meaningfully green. And we have a lot of clients that come to us who really want to make better decisions about how they build and how they sort of have impact in new construction. And so it's a really exciting company, and it's really exciting to share with you guys that there are alternatives. There are ways to build to a higher performance, and certainly for generations of use that a lot of people don't have opportunity to even consider. So it's really fun to share this. I certainly appreciate it because most people do not think about what's inside the walls of their home. They don't think about those materials. I spend my whole, life doing that. But what are the resulting, performances and comfort and ultimately radically less use of energy if you build to this standard? So it's really a craftsman approach, and it truly is still made by hand. It's just done so off-site in a protected workshop, or we don't say factory, but in a craftsman shop. So the tolerances are quite a bit higher, so that once it comes to site, it really comes together beautifully for a lasting build.
And just to give the audience some background, buildings consume a lot of energy these days. And the interface between the outdoors and the interior is the envelope, which is what you're concerned with mostly. Now that's walls, windows, doors, things like that. But the performance of the envelope is just critical to the performance of the building overall, both internally, how it functions in terms of keeping heat in or keeping cold air out, but also in terms of the aesthetics and how the object looks from the exterior. And it seems like the solution that you're going for is something that balances between the two. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is truly, it's what's invisible. And so it is hard to talk about, something that a lot of people don't think about. But our solution is that structure. It's the thermal bridge freeze structure that you can decorate however you want, which is what's really exciting for me. I've always worked with creatives, and it's a tool to hand to architects and designers to build to a higher performance level, but how you decorate it and how you play with it is truly, endless, which is, really fun. If you think about the same analogy of Legos, it's now taking those Legos and painting them, or, sticking rock on the outside and really dressing them up. So it is different, but to go back to the question of sort of the carbon counting of buildings, and we don't think about it. It's amazing like how we've come so far with the automobile, right? That we really now are so aware of what's your miles per gallon on your car, and are you driving electric, and how often do you have to plug it in, or are you plugging into solar? And I think we're really at the wave of beginning to understand the same for buildings. Truly, buildings use more energy than transportation. And how that's split is, number one, the upfront embodied carbon of the materials that we build with. So there's some major sort of carbon binges when we look at material costs. That would be concrete, steel, obviously, are really hard on impact. And so if we can lessen the material upfront and embodied carbon in the materials that we specify, we can have a huge long-term impact to the environment. And then the other side of that coin is, what is the energy use of those buildings? And it's a horrible statistic, but I'll throw it out there. 6% of the US annual emissions is coming straight from air conditioning. Just air conditioning alone is 6%. So if we can make these buildings more efficient so that the energy that we put into them to either heat or cool stays in the buildings longer, we can have a huge impact. So we're focused on the passive house approach, and that the ultimate in that is that it's 80 to 90% less energy for a higher level of comfort. So like to not have those cold spots flowing through at your feet, or not to avoid upstairs in your home in the middle of summer because it's going to be so hot up there, or just those killer energy bills. There are folks who can, really look to what are the increase in their utilities over winter and what a sacrifice that is for some families. And what people do in order to stay comfortable is horrible to make choices. So the idea that all buildings can perform and be comfortable with less draw on the earth, truly, and less draw on the grid, is so simple, but it's news to a lot of folks. So it's I don't know, it's empowering to people to be able to make these choices.
And from what I understand, most of the buildings that you're doing are new build, right, for residential.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting to note too that, a lot of buildings in this country are, even though it's a relatively young country, a lot of our buildings are still quite old. It's not uncommon in California or in New England to be living or renting buildings that are 50, 60, 70, even 100 years old. Now, nobody is driving around in a car that old unless you want to be quirky. But obviously, building technology has come a long ways in that time period. And so a lot of buildings, especially if you're building new, you might as well build something efficient. So the other side of this question too is, in terms of sustainability, is also creating new housing stock. Is that something also B.Public is concerned with regards to your product?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're directed to the housing market. We try and complicate running a business by attacking as many problems in the world as we possibly can. And the housing need is great. And it's only grown since 2008. We just really haven't produced enough houses, and it's been for, over a decade now. So the catch up for creating housing across the country at the time that we're also experiencing a huge shortage of tradespeople. We couldn't possibly meet the need for housing traditionally stick built in a way that we need to. So we're disruptive in that we're offering an alternative to green building and a much higher level of performance, but we're also speeding up the productivity of those local builders to produce more homes. And that's really where we're focused, is helping builders, get to this higher level of performance, but also raise their capacity so that they can truly serve their communities. And we're working with very small sort of mom and pop builders, as well as large developers who are making choices about how they build and wanting to have, a longer term investment in those buildings. But we simply couldn't build fast enough. I think the demand in California was 5 million new units. And I think the most that they had produced in a single year was 80,000. Like there's just such a demand.
No doubt. And I think just being, right now I'm in San Francisco, and the Bay Area has a huge housing crisis in general. We have tons of jobs that are being created, but there isn't enough space to house people to work those jobs. And one major issue is just the speed and cost of construction. And I'm a huge proponent of prefab and modular, simply because it makes decisions faster. I mean, you can kind of forefront decisions before the kind of permitting process or construction process. You can be very clear about what kind of outcome you're going to get. You can have much more control when you're constructing the project, rather than if you just leave it up to kind of doing something bespoke in the field. So I definitely think there's applicability all over this country, but especially in the markets that are facing extreme housing pressure, and then of course those that are facing climate pressure as well. So it's really great that you can kind of kill two birds with one stone with your business. I'm curious to also, we have the climate issue, we also have the housing issue. In the past couple of years, more people like we are right now are spending more and more time at home. So how has that affected maybe the direction of your business? You mentioned that you started it right before the pandemic happened, and then everyone's office is suddenly their living room. So does that have an effect on what you're doing?
And for us too. I mean, we've been really fortunate that we've spent the last 2 years on Zoom, reaching many more folks than we had, originally in our business plan for the first 2 years. I think there's many opportunities that COVID has brought. There's awareness around how we live and what's important to us in how we live and work. I think for some people, an awareness of just indoor air quality that no one had really thought of before. And so we're really excited to talk to people about fresh air and filtration on homes. And because our structures are airtight, you have to have that filtration and that constant circulating of air. So it's helped us in communicating sort of the values and the benefits of building to this, sort of higher level. I think really simply people are aware of like what's the light quality in their homes, like to have natural light and to have a sense of space and air in their homes. And I don't know, there was sort of the movement of flexible space. I think of like the 80s of sort of open plan. I think a lot of people are still drawn back to that in their homes, that they can move the desk around and move the sofa and really have flexibility in their space. And certainly for us, it's fun to, meet with our clients that we're designing homes with and think about that flexibility that, today maybe it's a home office, and maybe in future it's a guest room, or maybe you take that wall out and you have a much bigger dining room. I think people are thinking resiliently, which is really fun. So designing with people. I hate to say it, but the winter storm in Texas, where the grid was knocked out, we'd been talking about sort of grid instability and the need to level that out and to pull less off the grid for infill. If we're going to meet this housing demand that we have to be really thoughtful about how we grow our infrastructure. And probably the best thing is infill. I know a lot of people are talking about sort of backyard studios and casitas and that as a solution for housing, but it's also those empty brown fields and sort of those in between spaces that need to be filled. And that's on existing grid. That's really important. But as we build that infill, we need to be using less energy so that the grid can maintain and continue. And I think a lot of folks are really excited about net zero and zeroing out a project, so that if they're going to lower their demand, adding solar on top. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal that all this awareness has been grown over the last 2 years. And we are focused on new construction, but I think it's important for, everyone to know that there are things you can do to improve the performance of existing buildings. And it's not what we specialize in, but there really are some amazing systems and things you can do to improve the quality of existing construction. And it's the most resilient, the most sustainable thing to do, right, is to take care of the buildings that exist and bring them up.
That's interesting. I mean, you mentioned that obviously the pandemic has made us more aware of kind of our environment, but you also mentioned you have this background in education, and it seems like given what you are trying to do with your business and your product, you do need to educate and inform people, either your potential clients, or also you mentioned the tradespeople who you're working with. How has that been in terms, sort of, let's say, talking about and kind of telling people about what these benefits are, like you're telling us today?
Yeah, I think there's layers to that. Of course, there are people who have been building to passive standard in the field, or site built, as you put, bespoke, and this is like a breath of fresh air to them, because they've been working so hard to train their crews to new materials and new practices that it's, there's an ease and a welcome sigh of relief that we have something to help them get that done. I think a lot of people are really excited. And as you can imagine, for us, builders get most excited when they see and feel it, right? Like, we could talk about it all day, but until they feel it, and we did a build recently, we're on the 3rd day on the project, we had builders come through, and they weren't green building experts at all. They were the local builders that we invited out to come check it out. And they're just recognition of familiar forms in construction, that they could see and feel the materials, right? They could see the wood framing. They could touch it and understood, oh, it does. It really, like, when you have 10 inches of insulation, this feels amazing. And so, the education is really a sharing. It is certainly not trying to convince, or, there's no snake oil involved in this. It really is based on standard practices and recognizable materials. So learning with builders of what works, certainly in person, and giving opportunity to touch and feel and experience it. Zooms aren't great for builders. When we get on the road and get out in the field, it's the best thing possible for us. So we're really anxious to do more of that. I was just recently in California. We did a tour through upstate New York. We just went up to Colorado. So the more that we can do that, the better. And they're amazing training partners who are working with, larger groups to talk about building envelopes and performance. We're just there to support them and offer solutions, but it's been really gratifying. Talking to you teach, and I think one of the most important sort of outreach pieces for my job is to talk to as many training providers who aren't doing high performance. So talking to community colleges who have, trades programs, and offer to them that there are other ways to build, and we'd love to partner with them to talk about those materials, to talk about those approaches. Certainly talking to people about prefab, of course, for formal training, we'd really like those trades programs to be including CNC and other, like laser cutting and what's coming. It's important to start with the basics, but we're really excited to get many more people involved in sort of the, what's next? In the same way that you would, again, with automobiles, the trades programs that are doing auto shop, gosh, I hope they've got an EV in there somewhere, right? Same thing for us.
I see. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's interesting with housing because you have to still, there are still people who want to be more traditional with their construction methods, or if they're building a home for themselves. I experience it with my clients too, whether it's, using gas appliances instead of electric, or using certain materials instead of others. But at the same time, I think it's critical that we constantly look forward to what's possible in the future and what may become the norm somewhere down the road. And I'm curious specifically, Edie, about your entry into this industry. The construction industry is not known to be necessarily a very open one, let's say. It seems to have a lot of a kind of, it seems to be rather old and traditional in a lot of ways, and furthermore, definitely male dominated. I'm curious what your experience has been kind of entering into this field. As someone who, let's just say, doesn't necessarily look like your traditional builder or contractor.
Yeah, I definitely stick out on job sites. I think I've had such an interesting multiple careers, and I feel very fortunate, but I came to this work somewhat reluctantly. I am a very reluctant environmentalist, I would say. I feel like I sort of classically did everything but face the music. And for many years, I designed magazines, which was an amazing career. I was very fortunate to be in publishing and loved that work, but fundamentally it was entertainment. And I reached a certain age and I was offered the opportunity to switch into nonprofit work in a different systems change. I was invited to come work with a company that was doing education to workforce disruption, which is funny to say now, 2 years into COVID, because a lot of it was just-in-time skills-based education online.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, people thought, oh, you can't educate high schoolers or college students online. That doesn't make sense. Sadly, that revolution has happened. But I was able to leave sort of the entertainment world and jump in with heart and mind into work that I felt was really important change that I believed in. And from that work, I realized, and doing research, that the reason the cost of construction is going up every year, and I'm sitting in New Mexico, I think it's been 10 to 15% annually for years and years. And why that is because number one, we told people not to follow their family into the trades. We told them the best way to better yourself was to go to college. And so we emptied the trades successfully for 30 years. And here we sit with a really meaningful shortage that we can't refill. Mm-hmm. So no matter what we do to try and bring people back into the trades, we just can't get back to where we were. And so, like the work I was doing in education, there's a huge need for disruption, and certainly taking it offsite and making it possible to do 2 and 3 shifts in a shop in order to produce that structure to go on site very quickly is one way to achieve that disruption. So it's a strange trajectory. I have been married to an architect for, I'm embarrassed to say how many years, but many, many years. It's just, and so it's in a lot of ways, it is a family business, and have always loved design and loved architecture. But for me, it was, I think, being the unlikely candidate, not being an architect, not being a builder, and being a woman entering this business really is that sort of epiphany of, we're not going to fix this world. We're not going to fix the housing crisis. We're not going to fix the environmental crisis if everybody sort of steps back and says, well, it's not really me.
They just stay in their lane. Yeah.
And so, being a business person for so many years and realizing I have an opportunity to make change. And I am somewhat unlikely candidate, but gosh, every single day, I know I'm doing absolutely the right thing. This is the good fight for me. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I think because I'm an unlikely candidate, that people are really paying attention and listening, and I'm building partnerships and sort of collaborations that are non-traditional as well. And I think we need that. I think we need that in the design building industry. I think we need it in business, certainly. I don't think if everybody stays in their lane, we're going to make the kind of change that we need in this world. So I guess I'm, sort of sacrificial, crazy person. But I just jumped. It was one of those, it just has to be done. And I'm here, so I'm the one who needs to do it.
Well, I think it's really commendable. And, we come from a situation where previously people just specialized, you do one thing for your whole life and then you retire and you kind of wipe your hands clean of that. But what I think you're demonstrating is the ability to create, a repertoire of skills and then to build off them one after another. So, you mentioned you moved from the publishing into education, and now you're going into construction. And at each point, I'm sure you're getting lessons from your previous jobs and your previous roles. You're taking those lessons, you're applying them here. I'm curious, what's it like working with a physical product? You mentioned how the tradespeople, they need to react to kind of objects, to touch and feel. What's it like working with a physical object as opposed to, say, or kind of service-based business?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I had been, designing in those last couple of years, a lot of apps, a lot of websites. And, that was part of the jump with 2 feet was I got to build homes. Like it's not my legacy. I wouldn't say it's my legacy, but it is something that is meaningful and lasting to leave behind, where I'm pretty sure every app I designed has already been rebooted and gone. And I think the physicality of it is, it's a part of that desire to share it, right? Like there's no way to describe it. So creating it and manifesting it is the only way. And I think Hope and I, when we first started talking, we talked about this of it's not just sharing with builders why it's the same or different, but it's for anyone to understand what it feels like to be in a building that's built to this standard. And I strangely have discovered what affects people the most is actually the quiet of these structures. That because it's so well insulated, and our buildings are it's cellulose, so it's recycled newsprint that has been shredded. Funny, right? I made magazines for so many years, and now I built homes with newspapers inside. There's got to be something there, right? But that to experience it is physically different, and I think that's that connects for me. Of like, it is transformative, and how we live in this space and on this planet, and how we sort of occupy is different. And I like transforming that. It's frustrating. We could have named this company like the Impatient Architect, because I'm not known for my patience. So it is funny that it is faster to build. But I think being able to create something that is a comfort is really important to me. Like I did have to take it off of a screen and manifest it into the world. And I think a lot of what we do is collaborate and encourage architects. And of course, that's like pretty much my whole career has always been working with creatives and encouraging them and sort of shepherding them in different ways. And this one's just bigger blocks in a lot of ways.
I see. Well, I think your point is valid, because even within architecture and design, so much of these industries have been disrupted by the digital revolution. Things have become faster. It's easier to design in 3D, but sometimes we also get lost in the computer a little bit too much. And I think, what you're producing and what architects produce in the end, it has to be able to stand up by itself. It has to be able to kind of stand out in the world with dealing with gravity, dealing with weather, dealing with these other concerns that obviously you're trying to make sure you cover. And so I think it is a really interesting way of kind of entering into the field piece by piece, literally. Making sure that those pieces work really efficiently, and then having maybe a larger scale impact, but just with a single element. And I'm curious, actually, you had mentioned before that you are working with your husband, right? And you are working with a long-term friend. I'm curious how that kind of this vision came together, and how has it been working as a team after having known each other for so long?
It's been just amazing. We truly have been married for 20 years. And it's like, for people who love to work, and we're very hardworking and always have been, to be on the same team is incredible. We'd never worked together. I mean, other than, at our home and raising kids, but sharing that passion has really been amazing for us on the team. And our partner is an amazing friend and one of my friends from college. And I think it requires so much trust to do this. I mean, truly, we all three leapt, and we've been very fortunate, and we've hired great staff, and we have really wonderful clients, but still running a business and growing a business and scaling is challenging. And so to have that trust, I think it really is, we're different in so many ways, but that we really are friends first, and designed this to have as much impact as we could. And that was the primary. You've mentioned it a couple times. Our company name is B.Public Prefab, but we're incorporated as a benefit corp. So we are a C Corp, so, a for-profit entity, but we are mission-based. And it was really important to the three of us that no matter who in the long run, owns and runs this company, say 20 years down the road, that it is baked in, that there's mission at the center.
And was that mission, was that decided when you started, when you all jumped and kind of launched?
Yeah, but we really, it was, we really brainstormed it, and we really went through a process of what does that mean for us. We had a great advisor early on who would come to meetings and just shake his head and say, like, no one ever thinks this hard about starting a company. You guys are just amazingly thoughtful. Would you just hurry up? But it was important to us to be thoughtful that way. We knew we were different. We're a different group. We are all creatives, and we think through, sort of that design principles is sort of at the center, that we really do put it all out at the wall and decide together what's the best path. So it's been really an amazing journey. And I think it really was, it came about because my husband has been designing homes to this standard for many, many years. For I think 12 years, he's been doing passive house approach. And every new home for clients, he had to basically find and train builders and explain to them really what this construction requires and what kind of attentiveness to detail. And it was painful because he had more clients than he could find builders for. So there was a need for disruption there, as well as a desire to share this information with others, to build to a higher level without having to go through the pain and suffering and learning that he went through. And so it really was the genesis of the company was from technology that he was designing and testing. And then Charlotte had just finished a project, I love this, that Jonah had designed for her, a studio for her wife. And when she learned that he had developed this panelized system, she was just really mad that her studio wasn't built with and she just was so mad that she just like got on a plane and came out to learn more about it. And by the end of those 5 days and visiting all the projects that he designed, that was it. She was all in. This is what she was going to do. This was the solution. It made perfect sense. And, so out of, anger or jealousy, the company was started. Maybe not your normal Genesis story.
Extreme
really
case of buyer's remorse.
Yeah. And, it's a very high performing studio, but it was still like, I think it was a long and not painful, but slow process to get just that small, tiny project done. So she understood what it was that he was offering and had designed. So we've been really fortunate to do this together.
It's amazing. Yeah. And no, I mean, I think a lot of us who are trying to start our own business, like I'm trying to launch my own architecture firm. I think that trust that you mentioned is just so key, along with communication and just effort, hard work, those things together. I think when you stick to it as a team that way, usually good things happen. I just want to, we're time here, but I just want to ask one last thing from you, since you've gone through this process in this business and you've done many other amazing things before. What advice would you give people when you have a goal in mind, you have a direction that you want to go, but you don't see how, what the path is exactly? I think especially right now, a lot of people have big ideas what they want to do, and they might be daunted because, like you mentioned, you might have to take this leap. What kind of advice or perspective would you give those people who are facing this situation?
Yeah, and I think we just touched on it on the last question. I think realizing that it's an evolution, that a business needs to evolve, and it needs to grow and breathe, and that it is constant, that it really does need to be sort of shepherded and cared for, whether that's hiring staff or finding the right partnerships. That it isn't a fixed idea. And I think when we think it's, I mentioned I worked with a lot of designers early on. I helped graphic designers and photographers and web designers sort of build the structure of a company. And for each entity, it's different. There's no pre-prescribed. And I think it's more dangerous when we believe, oh, it has to look this way. I mean, certainly I look at myself in the mirror and I don't think, oh, CEO of a prefab company. If we believe in those sort of prescriptions, it leaves a lot of people out and a lot of opportunity out. So I think, of course, having a great idea and having a tremendous amount of passion is important. But I think that it can evolve is a part of it. And I think, starting small or big also works. I don't think that sort of our idea of business as it has been needs to remain. I think we've seen a huge, revolution during COVID of everything that can be done at a distance and can be done safely. And ingenuity is incredible. So looking to other industries for ideas and sort of that piecing together, we really don't have to tell this story originally. We just have to tell it for ourselves and draw people to it. That's all we have to do.
Oh, powerful. No, it's quite fascinating. And I think, like I said before, I'm very impressed with everything you guys have been able to do under these circumstances. And I really, truly believe that there's a lot of value in your products and what you're offering, both at a small scale for people who are building their homes, but also trying to answer more macro scale problems like climate change, housing crisis, things of that nature. But no, I think that's a great way to end it, Edie. Right before we leave, I just wanted to know if there's if people are looking for more about B.Public or about you, where can they find it? Is there anything you want to shout out right before we go?
Yeah, our website is ever evolving, like many things in business. It's B.Public.prefab.com. So it's B.Public without the period between the B and the public. We're on social media, of course, on Facebook, Instagram. Occasionally we show up on podcasts and video casts like this one, and just continuing to spread the word. We are accessible. We try and be really responsive. That's something a little bit different than some folks in the building industry. We try and respond to everyone and offer estimates and feedback and technical assistance, even if we're not the right solution, but to encourage people in that exploration. So feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Edie. Best of luck in the new year. Thank you, Hope, for hosting this as well. And I hope that this reaches a lot of people and people get interested in what you guys are doing. Prefab is really the way of the future. And I think you guys are doing exactly right. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you, Hope.
So great. What a beautiful way to launch 2022 in the January-February issue of the Incandescent magazine. Edie, I'm so excited to see how your company grows. And Alex, of course, working with you is just a pleasure and a joy. So we'll bring more of this to you as we all move forward. So Happy New Year, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.